I'm Lily, a 32-year-old woman who believed in the warmth of love and the promise of a shared future. My husband, Ethan, was once the sun in my sky, but over the years, his light has dimmed, leaving me in a growing chill of neglect and harsh words. It started subtly, a missed dinner here, a harsh word there. But then it became our norm. His once tender glances turned cold, and his touches, which used to spark joy, became rare and perfunctory. One particularly cold evening, I was attempting to bridge the distance that had formed between us, setting up a nice dinner hoping to recapture some of our old warmth. "Ethan, dinner's ready," I called out, trying to inject some cheer into my voice. He walked in, his eyes scanning the table, not a flicker of appreciation in his gaze. "You know I don't like salmon," he muttered, his words clipped. "But you used to love it," I replied, the hurt clear in my voice. He shrugged, dismissing my effort and the memories attached to it. "That was then. Can't you do anything right, Lily?" His words stung, each one a reminder of how far we drifted. I bit my lip, holding back tears, as I watched him eat in silence, his indifference a stark contrast to the love-filled meals we once shared. After dinner, as I was cleaning up, the weight of his growing disdain and blame became too much to bear silently. "Why do you treat me this way, Ethan? What happened to us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He scoffed, standing up to leave the room. "Maybe if you weren't so barren, things would be different. You're just not enough, Lily. Not as a wife, not as a woman." His cruel words echoed in the now empty room, each syllable etched painfully into my heart. I was left alone, with the remnants of a dinner that tasted of lost love and broken dreams. That night, as I lay in bed, Ethan's presence beside me felt like miles apart. I turned away, my silent tears a testament to the cold shift that had taken over our lives. It was clear that I was alone in my pain, my longing for a child turned into a weapon of blame and shame. The next day, I confided in my diary, the only place I felt safe to express my deepest fears and sorrows. "He doesn't see me anymore, doesn't hear me. I'm just a shadow in my own home, a ghost of the woman I used to be." The evening of the family dinner arrived with a tension I could almost taste. Ethan's parents, Mary and George, had always treated me with kindness, a stark contrast to their son's recent coldness. As we gathered around the dining table, the air was filled with the clinking of cutlery and the simmering undercurrent of unspoken issues. George, ever the patriarch, raised his glass to toast. "To family," he declared with a warm smile. "To family," we echoed, our voices a chorus of varying emotions. As the dinner progressed, the conversation drifted to the topic I dreaded most, children. George, with his usual bluntness, broached the subject. "For years, Ethan, Lily. We were hoping for a grandchild to spoil by now." Ethan's mother, Mary, chimed in, her voice gentle yet firm. "Perhaps it's time to consider seeing a specialist. There could be many reasons for not conceiving, and it's best to understand them." I felt Ethan's gaze on me, his eyes like ice. "We know the reason, don't we, Lily?" "It's her," he said, his voice dripping with accusation. The words stung, more so under the concerned gaze of his parents. "It's not just about me, Ethan. It takes two, you know," I replied, my voice steady but my hands trembling under the table. Mary, with her medical background, sensed the tension. "Then it's settled. Both of you will go for a checkup. It's the only way to know for sure," she stated, a note of finality in her voice. Ethan laughed, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, we'll go. But we already know the answer, don't we?" Later that evening, as Ethan and I cleaned up in silence, the weight of the situation bore down on me. The idea of the medical examinations loomed large, a beacon of hope and a source of dread all at once. "Ethan," I started, breaking the silence, "I'm scared. What if there's really something wrong with me?" He didn't look at me, his focus on the dishes in the sink. "Then we'll know, won't we? Better than living in denial." His words were meant to be dismissive, but I caught the flicker of something else in his voice. "Fear?" Uncertainty? It was hard to tell. As I went to bed that night, the house felt colder than ever. The uncertainty of the coming days was a heavy blanket, smothering the last embers of warmth between us. Yet, despite everything, a part of me clung to the hope that the tests might lead to a solution, a way forward out of this stagnant bitterness. The days following our medical examinations were some of the longest of my life. As I awaited the results, my thoughts constantly circled back to what they might reveal, to the myriad of ways they could impact our already strained relationship. Ethan, however, seemed more irritable than anxious, his patience wearing thinner with each passing day. One afternoon, as I sat lost in thought, Ethan stormed into the room, his face twisted with annoyance. "Look at this place, Lily. It's a mess. You're so caught up in your own head, you've let the house go." Before I could respond, he grabbed my hand and practically dragged me into his office. "Start here. I want every surface clean, especially my desk. I can't work in this filth." His words stung, but I bit my tongue and began to clean, my motions mechanical as I tried to suppress the hurt and confusion swirling inside me. As I moved to dust his desk, my hand accidentally caught the edge of a folder, sending it tumbling to the floor, papers spilling out in a chaotic cascade. I knelt to gather them, apologizing under my breath, but as I started to put them back, my eyes caught on the contents. There were medical insurance papers, hospital receipts for childbirth, all paid for by Ethan. A name I didn't recognize, likely the mother, was listed, along with a date not too far in the past. The truth hit me like a physical blow: Ethan had a child with another woman. My heart pounded, a mix of shock, betrayal, and a deep, searing pain coursing through me. But I knew I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed to be smart, to gather evidence and plan my next steps carefully. Once I was sure Ethan was occupied elsewhere, I quickly copied all the documents, my hands shaking as I worked. Each copy was a silent confirmation of the lies and deceit that had infiltrated our marriage, of the double life Ethan had been leading right under my nose. As I tucked the copies away in a safe place, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The hurt was still there, a dull, persistent ache, but it was now accompanied by a clarity of purpose. I wouldn't let Ethan get away with this betrayal. I would bide my time, wait for the right moment to reveal everything. For the rest of the day, I moved through the house like a shadow, performing my chores with a mechanical efficiency. Ethan remained oblivious, wrapped up in his own affairs, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. That night, as I lay in bed, Ethan's breathing steady and even beside me, I couldn't help but wonder how many other nights he'd shared with another, how many lies he'd told to cover his tracks. The pain was almost unbearable, but it was also a catalyst, transforming my sadness and despair into a quiet, burning resolve. I didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing was clear: I wouldn't be the silent, suffering wife any longer. I would confront Ethan, confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The wait for the examination results was still there, a looming question mark in our lives, but it was no longer the only thing defining my existence. I had a plan, a purpose, and I would see it through to the end. No more waiting, no more wondering. It was time to act. As Ethan's birthday unfolded, the house buzzed with the hum of conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. I circulated among the guests, a smile plastered on my face, my heart racing with the anticipation of the revelation to come. When it was time for Ethan to open his gifts, the room filled with the rustle of wrapping paper and appreciative murmurs. Finally, it was my turn. I handed him a neatly wrapped box, my hand steady, my resolve firm. "Happy birthday, Ethan," I said, my voice betraying none of my inner turmoil. He accepted it with a confident smirk, perhaps expecting something mundane, something that would affirm the facade of our marriage. But as he lifted the lid and his eyes scanned the contents, his expression morphed from smug assurance to utter shock. "What's this?" he stammered, his voice faltering as he held up the documents for the room to see. "It's the truth," I said simply, standing firm amidst the sudden wave of tension that swept through the room. The guests leaned in, a collective intake of breath filling the space as they tried to make sense of the scene unfolding before them. Ethan's mother, Mary, took the papers from his trembling hands, her eyes widening as she read the details spelled out on the page. "Ethan, is this true? Do you have a child with another woman?" Her voice was a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Ethan's face turned pale, his usual composure shattered. "It's not how it looks, I can explain." He fumbled with the papers, his gaze darting around the room, desperately seeking an ally. But there was no respite to be found. The guests murmured among themselves, the air thick with judgment and shock. Ethan's father, George, stood up, his face a mask of disappointment and rage. "Explain? How could you do this, not just to Lily, but to all of us? We're your family." His voice boomed, cutting through the whispers like a knife. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He looked around at the faces of friends and family, at the disillusionment and accusation reflected back at him. The room, once filled with the warmth of celebration, now felt cold, the air heavy with betrayal. I watched him, feeling a mixture of vindication and sorrow. "Everyone, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I thought it was time the truth came out," I said, addressing the room. The guests remained in place, the celebration forgotten, as the gravity of the situation settled upon us all. No one moved to leave, the shock of the revelation rooting them to the spot. The festive atmosphere had been irrevocably tainted, the joy of the occasion turned to ash. Ethan looked around, his eyes meeting mine, and in that moment, I saw the realization of the consequences of his actions dawn upon him. The room stayed silent, the tension palpable, as we all waited for what would come next. The revelation had been made, and now, there was no turning back. As the room's shock over the initial revelation began to settle, I knew it was time to deliver the final blow. Ethan, pale and shaken from the fallout of his exposed secrets, was still grasping at strangled threads of dignity when I stepped forward, holding another set of documents. "Ethan," I began, my voice clear and unwavering, "there's more you need to know." I handed him the envelope containing the medical results we'd both been anxiously awaiting. The room, already thick with tension, seemed to hold its breath as Ethan's hands trembled slightly while opening it. His eyes scanned the contents, and the color completely drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale. "What is it, Ethan? What does it say?" his mother, Mary, demanded, her voice sharp with concern and growing anger. He couldn't speak, couldn't even lift his gaze from the paper that spelled out a truth so ironic it was almost poetic. He was the one who was infertile. I spoke up, filling the heavy silence. "The tests show that Ethan is infertile. It's not me who's been unable to conceive." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Whispers erupted among the guests, a mix of sympathy for me and disbelief at Ethan's situation. His parents, Mary and George, looked from the papers to their son with expressions that morphed from shock to anger. "Infertile? But you blamed Lily all this time." Mary's voice cracked, her disappointment palpable. George stood, his disappointment hardening into a cold fury. "You've not only been unfaithful and lied to us all, but you dared to shame and blame Lily for something that was your own issue." The accusations flew, thick and fast, each one landing like a blow. Ethan's facade of control shattered completely, leaving behind a man I barely recognized. He was no longer the confident, sometimes arrogant person I had married. Instead, he was small, exposed, and undeniably alone. "But I didn't know," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper against the storm of condemnation. "It doesn't matter if you knew or not," George boomed, his voice resonating with finality. "You've deceived everyone here, most of all Lily." The room buzzed with the weight of betrayal and deceit. Ethan's life, once so orderly and controlled, was unraveling before our very eyes. His once loving parents now looked at him with eyes filled with something akin to strangers' disdain. As the room processed the news, Ethan's mother, Mary, turned to him with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Ethan, if you're infertile, then who is the father of your mistress's child?" The question hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Ethan's shock was apparent, his face contorting into an expression of disbelief and betrayal. I don't know. I never. I never considered she might be cheating on me too. The admission sent a ripple through the room, the guests exchanging looks of disbelief and pity. George, Ethan's father, stood up, his stature commanding the attention of everyone present. "You've been deceived, son, just as you've deceived us all." It's a bitter irony that's hard to swallow. The accusations continued to fly, each word a nail in the coffin of Ethan's once neatly arranged life. His parents, once his staunchest supporters, now looked at him with eyes filled with disappointment and a deep, unspoken sadness. They had lost a grandson they thought they had and were now grappling with the reality of their son's deceit and the complexities of his betrayal. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Ethan seemed to crumble, his usual arrogance and control evaporating into the charged air of the room. I need to figure this out. I need to understand what's happened," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The guests began to leave, the atmosphere too charged with anger and disillusionment to bear. Ethan's parents remained, their expressions grim and thoughtful, a stark contrast to the joy and celebration that had marked the beginning of the evening. The room emptied until it was just Ethan, his parents, and me. The silence that followed was a testament to the broken relationships and trust that lay in tatters around us. Ethan's world had come crashing down, and as he sat there, head in his hands, it was clear that the journey ahead would be a difficult one, filled with introspection, legal battles, and the daunting task of rebuilding his shattered life. For me, the revelation of the medical results was a vindication of sorts, but it was also a reminder of the complex web of lies and deceit that had ensnared us all. As I looked around the room, at the faces of those I had once considered family, I knew that while this chapter was closing, the story was far from over. There were questions to be answered, wounds to heal, and a new path to forge. The tables had turned, indeed, but the full extent of the fallout was yet to be realized. The dust had barely settled after the revelations of Ethan's birthday when I found myself navigating the aftermath of our shattered marriage. The house, once filled with shared dreams and laughter, now echoed with the heavy silence of our broken vows. Ethan, a mere shadow of the man I once knew, tried to approach me the morning after, his eyes rimmed with red, a mix of sleeplessness and perhaps regret. "Lily," he started, his voice hoarse. I don't even know what to say." "What is there to say, Ethan?" I replied, my voice steady, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. "The truth is out. There's no taking it back." He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that now seemed foreign. "I know I've messed up, more than I can ever fix. But I was scared, Lily. Scared of what it meant to be infertile, to not be able to give us, what we wanted." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words, yet unable to fully comprehend the depth of his deceit. "Being scared doesn't excuse your actions, Ethan. You lied, you cheated, and you hurt everyone around you, especially me." He nodded, the fight seemingly gone from him. "I know. And I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, if not for us, then for my own conscience." The room grew quiet, the air between us thick with unsaid words and unresolved pain. I knew that the path ahead was one I would have to walk alone, the trust and love we once shared now just remnants of a past life. In the days that followed, I took action. I met with lawyers, collected the necessary documents, and filed for divorce. Each step felt like a liberation, a reclaiming of the dignity and respect I had lost in the shadow of Ethan's betrayal. The legal proceedings were a blur, a series of meetings and signatures that dissolved the life we had built together. Ethan didn't fight it, his compliance a small solace in the storm of our separation. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, the final papers in hand, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. My marriage was over, the dreams we shared irreparably damaged. Yet, I also felt a spark of hope, a sense that from the ashes of this ordeal, a new, stronger Lily was emerging. The community, once so integral to our lives, watched from a distance, their whispers and pitying glances a constant reminder of the scandal that had unfolded. But among the murmurs, I also found support, friends and neighbors reaching out with offers of help and words of encouragement. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden, the sun warming my face, Mary came to visit. Her eyes were kind, but I saw the hurt that still lingered there. Lily, I just want you to know, we don't blame you. You've handled this with more grace than anyone could expect, she said, taking my hand in hers. I looked at her, the woman who had been like a mother to me, and felt a pang of shared loss. Thank you, Mary. I just wish things could have been different. She squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the complex tangle of emotions that surrounded us. You'll always be part of this family, Lily. No matter what. The conversation lingered in the air long after she left, a bittersweet reminder of the ties that still bound me to the life I was leaving behind. As I packed up my belongings, each object a memory of the life Ethan and I had shared, I realized that this wasn't just an end, it was also a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to rediscover who I was outside the shadow of my marriage. And as I turned the key in the lock one last time, leaving behind the house that had been my home, I knew that this wasn't just a farewell. It was a declaration of independence, a first step into a future that, while uncertain, was entirely my own. The finality of signing the divorce papers was both liberating and somber. I had filed for divorce from Ethan, demanding compensation for the emotional turmoil and betrayal he caused. My lawyer, a competent and empathetic woman, assured me that the evidence I gathered made a strong case for a substantial settlement. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself entangled not only in our divorce but also in a legal battle with the mistress who had deceived him. He had spent a fortune on medical expenses and supporting the child he believed was his, only to discover the web of lies that had ensnared him. Now, he was suing her, trying to recoup some of his losses and salvage what little dignity he had left. I watched from a distance as Ethan's once controlled and proud life unraveled. There was no joy in seeing him brought so low, but neither was there pity. He had made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. The man I once loved had become a stranger, one whose fate no longer stirred any emotion in me other than a detached acknowledgement that justice, in its own way, was being served. As for me, I was busy building a new life. The settlement from the divorce provided a financial cushion that allowed me some peace of mind. I moved into a new place, smaller and cozier than the house I shared with Ethan, a place that quickly started to feel like home. It was my sanctuary, filled with my things, decorated to my taste, a visual representation of my newfound independence. I often sat in my new living room, a cup of tea in hand, reflecting on the tumultuous journey I had undergone. The tears and heartache felt like a distant memory, and in their place was a growing sense of self-awareness and strength. I had survived the worst of storms, and now relished the calm that followed. Friends and family were a constant source of support, their love and care helping to mend the parts of me that were broken by Ethan's betrayal. They cheered me on as I took the first tentative steps into a future that was entirely my own, unshaded by the expectations or failings of another. In the end, I found that I didn't need revenge or to see Ethan suffer. My greatest triumph was in reclaiming my life, in proving to myself that I could move past the pain and emerge stronger and more resilient. The wounds he inflicted would always be part of my story, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they were a testament to my ability to overcome and to thrive, despite the odds. As I closed this chapter of my life, I felt a profound sense of closure and optimism. The journey ahead was mine alone, filled with opportunities and experiences waiting to be discovered. And as I stepped out each day, I did so with a lighter heart and a certainty that no matter what the future held, I was ready for it, stronger and wiser than ever before. Ethan was a chapter closed, a lesson learned, and now it was time to write new stories, ones filled with hope, growth, and the promise of a better tomorrow.